G'day athletes, welcome to the Kilted Athlete Podcast. My name is Keith and you're listening to a very special episode. So the reason this episode's so special is it is 1 year since I recorded my first podcast episode. So this is the first anniversary of the Kilted Athlete Podcast. So 1 year ago today, pretty much at the same time of day as I'm recording this now, I I sat down in the studio, aka my wife's office, and I plugged my little microphone into my phone, and I started recording. Now this has been a work in progress for probably a couple of months. I've been researching, trying to work out how to create a podcast, and to be honest, the actual mechanics of making a podcast isn't that difficult. It was just kind of, I guess, digging up the courage to actually put my thoughts onto onto a recording and put it out there for anyone to listen to. So yeah, a year ago today, I sat down and recorded my very first episode, um, and it was aptly called Make It Happen. It was about talking about how to make things happen, plans, dreams, goals, whatever things that you keep talking about doing, how to actually make those things happen. So I put a few tips of my own into, I guess, onto this recording, and yeah, that was my very first episode. Obviously, being like a fitness-based podcast, there was a fitness spin to it, but you can kind of relate this thing to anything that you do, whether it's making a podcast, for example, or learning an instrument, learning a language, whatever you talk about doing and want to do. Um, yeah, this is a few tips of mine as to yeah, how to make it happen. So that was episode one. Now, episode one, actually, I, I was so nervous when I recorded this. The episode went for about 17 minutes, but it took me over 2 hours to record it. It was, I kept stopping and going back and recording over. I think I've got a lot better at that now. It definitely takes a lot less time to record an episode um, than it used to. When you think it took me over 2 hours to record an episode, there was less than 20 minutes, and nowadays it probably takes me probably 10 minutes longer than the actual length of the episode. I don't often like stop and record over very often, unless I make a really big balls up, but I kind of tend to roll with it more. So anyway, um, because it is my first anniversary of recording the Kilted Athlete podcast, what I thought I'd do is I'd re-record that very first episode that I made. So re-recording the Make It Happen episode. See if I can do a bit better job. Just kind of no, I guess make a version 2.0 of yeah, Make It Happen. So here we go. So welcome to the Kilted Athlete Podcast. Welcome to episode number 52, and this is the version 2.0 of Make It Happen. So there's lots of things we talk about doing in life. Lots of things we kind of wish we could do or want to do or plan to do, and for some reason or other they don't happen. So like I said, this is a fitness podcast, so obviously the spin on this is going to be fitness. But once again, you can apply these to a lot of things in life. The things that you want to do. It might be like starting a new job. It could be like doing a new course, getting a new qualification, could be going on a holiday. It could be lots of different things. Um, and look, I have learned over the years that there's many things that I have wanted to do, and they just didn't happen for some reason or another. And I've only really got myself to blame because I didn't make them happen. So I guess I'm kind of self-taught on the art of making things happen. If you really want something, you will make it happen. If you don't really want it, you'll make an excuse, or you can just sit there and keep making excuses, and and end up what you want never happens, and and like you've only got yourself to blame really. So anyway, I've got 7 tips here. Um, about These are my tips how to make things happen. And these are tips that I've kind of learnt from my own experience. I guess I'm a bit self-taught on this now. If you really want to make something happen, if you really want something to happen, you need to make it happen yourself. So here we go. 7 tips to make things happen. And the first tip, the number one tip to make things happen, and it's probably very obvious, it probably so obvious it sounds a bit stupid, but the first tip is to start. And look, I know it sounds a bit silly, obviously, to make something happen, you need to start. But how many times have you wanted to do something or had a thought to do something, but you haven't got started on it? It's amazing the things we don't start, the little projects that we've got that we never start on, the fitness equipment that we buy that we never use. How many things do you have lying around in cupboards and sheds somewhere that you intended to do something with, you intended to do a project, and you just never got started? We all have them. We all have unstarted projects. We talk about unfinished projects, but how many unstarted projects do we have? So I'm going to give a couple of examples here. First example is this podcast. Like I said, before I recorded my first episode, I deliberated for like 2 months. I thought I want to start a podcast, um, and I just put it off for ages. I put it off. I got all the equipment. I didn't get much equipment. I'm actually still using that same little plug-in microphone that I recorded my first episode with. Didn't go all out and buy heaps of expensive equipment, but I got the equipment. I researched how to make a podcast, and funnily enough, um, a lot of advice that I got from other podcasters was just start. You know, if you want to do a podcast, the toughest thing to do is to start, and that's quite often your toughest step is to start. Yes, all the rest of it's going to be tough, but just making that start is like a really, really big hurdle. Um, the second example is, and I have mentioned on other episodes before, I kind of have a bit of a hobby that I quite often joke was my midlife crisis. I'm a bagpipe player. I play bagpipes. So I turned just before I was about 39, I think nearly 40. But I've been kind of like wishing for years that I knew how to play bagpipes. I'm thinking, what an awesome skill that would be. You'd watch bagpipe players on, Anzac Day or in marches and things like that, and you think, what an amazing skill that would be to have. And I probably did nothing about it like for many, many years. And then I realized this, probably not far off my 40th birthday, I thought, you know what? I'm not going to magically get the ability to play these things. I need to start. So I went out and had my first bagpipe lesson. So I'm glad I took it up. That's an amazing thing. I'm still on this amazing journey of of learning bagpipes, but I started. And look, I've been playing for like, what, 12 years now. And I'm so glad I did. But my only regret is that I didn't start earlier. I didn't start when I had that like initial thought of, hey, how awesome would it be to learn bagpipes? So yes, start. Don't put off starting. Like start. So tip number 2 to make it happen is to have a plan. It's always good to have a plan, or this like kind of a dot point plan. You don't need to have everything meticulously planned out to every minute, every second, every rep, and every thing exact, but you need to have a plan. It's good to wing it to a certain extent. And look, I'm a very like a wing it kind of guy. You can just ask my wife; she'll verify that. But deep down, I do have a bit of a plan, so I don't just completely go into things with absolutely no plan. As much as as much as my wife thinks I just go into things without any sort of plan. I do have a bit of a broad plan there in the back of my head. I might not tell everyone my plan, but I do have a plan there. It's good to have a plan. Um, it's good to like know, what you want to achieve and how you're going to achieve it. Um, Otherwise it's just kind of treading water. So if your goal is to, for example, run a marathon, um, you're not just going to wake up the next morning and run 42.2 kilometers. You, you need to have a plan. Well, it's kind of good to have a plan. Having said that, though, I did read a book by a bloke in England who actually woke up one morning and ran his very first marathon um, because his wife dared him to. Um, so it was kind. I guess there are exceptions. This bloke obviously didn't have a plan. He just got up in the morning. It's actually quite a good book. It's a book called Marathon Man. It's by a bloke called Rob Young, um, and yeah, he actually did like over 365 marathons in one year after getting up and doing his very first marathon one morning because his wife um, dared him to. I think if I remember rightly, they were watching the London Marathon on TV the night before, and his wife kind of bet him like a penny or something that he'd never run a marathon. So he got up the next morning, ran his very first marathon, um, and then went on to run like 360 or 370 marathons in a year, and he did it all for charity. Very inspiring. Um, I wouldn't recommend that as a marathon training plan, getting up one morning and doing your very first marathon, having had no training, but um, once again, I'm digressing a bit, but look, generally, if you're going to run a marathon, you want to have a plan, you want to have a training plan. You kind of want to set a marathon, in the future when you want to be doing this and then come up with a plan to, you know, a training plan to make this marathon happen. And like anything else, whether it's, a fitness orientated plan, whether it's, learning bagpipes, whether it's a saving money plan, if you want, $10,000 to go and have a good holiday, you're not just suddenly going to find that $10,000 in your letterbox one morning, um, or maybe you will. It's never happened to me, but don't expect to find that $10,000 sitting in your letterbox. You're going to have to come up with a plan to how you're going to get this money, how you're going to save this money, how you're going to get this $10,000 so you can go on your holiday. So yes, number two, have a plan. So number three kind of goes like hand in hand with number two, I guess, and that's having a backup plan. And the backup plan isn't like you giving up on your original plan. It's it's kind of like a if things don't go exactly the way that you planned them to, which is quite often the case, that they won't go how you planned it. Things will go wrong. Things won't go exactly the way you planned it. So you need to have that backup plan. If you don't have that backup plan, you would kind of tend to give up. But, we need to have that ability to regroup, form another plan on the fly. You might be training for that marathon, and you might, you know, have an injury, so you suddenly need to change that plan and set your sights on another marathon maybe 2 months later. Um, Something you might have like a you might be saving up for that holiday, and you have like an unexpected bill, and you can only save, like $7,000 instead of your 10,000. So your backup plan might be go on a shorter holiday, or you might have like some way that so it still happens. This thing still happens. You've still made it happen, but you've had to like change your plans a little bit um, because of circumstances. Often people have this like all or nothing mentality, where if something doesn't go exactly the way that they planned it, they just like give up altogether. I've seen people like with a savings goal, and they'll be saving money, and then that unexpected bill comes. So instead of like just regrouping and saying, hey, well, that bill's happened, I can still continue my savings goal. It just might change my overall goal. That holiday might have to come a couple of months later, or I might have to make it shorter, or something like that. Or I've seen people when that thing goes wrong, when that bill comes in, even though the bill only cost a fraction of what they'd already saved, they go and blow the rest of the money they've saved because it's like, oh well, I failed now. I'll go and spend all that money. Another example would be like someone trying to eat healthier. I'm not going to use that D word. I'm not a big fan of that word diet. Um, we're actually all on a diet. Like whatever we eat is our diet. Um, but anyway, if you're trying to eat healthier and give up on some of the things that you kind of enjoy, it could be some chocolate, could be some cake, could be a beer every now and then, um, and then you give up on it altogether. I'm never drinking beer again, or never having a piece of cake again. And then something happens and you fail, or you feel you fail because you had a piece of cake, you had a beer, and then because of that you just go and give up altogether. So, oh well, I ate that chocolate, so I might as well eat more chocolate now because I've failed. It's the all or nothing mentality, which comes from not having a backup plan. So yes, have a plan, but have a backup plan. Your backup plan, you still, with your backup plan, you still want to achieve the same outcome. It's just a different way of going about it. So, if your plan is to run that marathon, then you go and get injured, you've found yourself in another marathon 2 months later. So the outcome is still the same, but you've kind of like had to change your plan a little bit instead of like giving up on that plan or that thing you want to do altogether. So yes, definitely have a backup plan, and you might want to have 2 or 3 backup plans if this doesn't happen. I'm going to do this. I do it at the gym a lot. I'll go to the gym with a plan of what I want to achieve in the gym, what muscles I'm going to be working, Um, the reality is I've got a limited amount of time in the gym, and if the equipment that I want to use is being used, I need to have another plan. So my plan might have been to, work legs, do squats and deadlifts, but the squat racks might be taken. So therefore I go and do bench pressing or another exercise, and I'll do a squats and deadlifts the next day. That's the backup plan. So the goal is still being achieved. I've just had to reshuffle. So tip number 4, here's the big one. Preempt your excuses. And you know what your excuses are going to be. It's like the excuses come from you. So you you're the best person to know what the excuses are going to be. So identify what those excuses are going to be, preempt them, and come up with a plan to tackle them head on. If you plan to go to the gym in the afternoon, but you know that you finish work and you don't feel like going to the gym, so half the time you don't go, change the time to go to the gym, do it in the morning. Preempt that excuse. You know that that is going to be your excuse. So take that excuse out of the equation. And another example of this might be if you know that if you're going to come home from work, get changed, and then go to the gym, but you get home and sit on the lounge, watch TV or whatever happens, or your kids are there, something happens, and you never end up going to the gym, then you could preempt that by taking your change of clothes to work with you, going straight from work to the gym before you go home. So preempt that excuse. I used to run with a bloke that um, he would do, he would never pass his own house um, because once he ran past his house, his body or his mind would tell him the run was over, he'd stop. So he'd run like all sorts of zigzaggy courses. So he never actually passed his own house until he got the distance that he planned on going. So he was preempting his his excuses. He knew that like if he did laps around the block, he'd stop at his house. There was an excuse there to stop the run because he was home, so he would always just go everywhere else all around the neighbourhood, but never actually pass his own house until he was finished the run. So that was a very good example of preempting your own excuses. So number 5, this is a big one because I do see this a lot as a personal trainer. Um, I do see people that they take one or two mentalities, one of two mentalities. They're either the victor or they're the victim. So number 5 is to be the victor, not the victim. So the victim is going to come up with all the excuses and say, "Oh, I'm old," or how had a bad day at work, or there's always, and we all kind of we do have bad days at work, but it's kind of like the people. There's always something. There's always some kind of like excuse why they can't do this thing that maybe other people are doing. And quite often these victims they'll come up with, they'll see someone else doing the same thing and they'll go, oh yeah, that's all right for that person. They're younger than me, or that's all right for that person because of this reason. I actually hear it a lot with things like musicians. Like I'm like I said, I play bagpipes. There's people that like are a lot better at it than me. Um, but quite often, like someone that's not so good will say, "Oh, that's all right for them. They've got a natural talent." Or, you know, someone that runs faster, it's all right for them. They're like, this kind of build or whatever. Um, the victim mentality kind of always draws on that, kind of excuse why they can't do something. Whereas the victor mentality will embrace the challenge. They'll be inspired by that challenge. So instead of me looking at that really good bagpipe player and going, oh, well, that's all right for him, like um, he's got natural talent. Um, I would look at him and be inspired by that and go, well, this guy has obviously put in lots and lots of practice and to get that good, and to get that good I need to put in lots and lots of practice. So take the victor mentality, not the victim mentality. There's kind of an old joke in running that anyone, if you're running along and someone passes you, it's kind of like an old joke that that person mustn't be going as far as you if they're running faster. It's kind of a bit of a joke, but it does kind of point out, um, some people do say things like that. It's like, like if someone's lifting more weight to me at the gym, oh, well, that person's like naturally built for that, and that could be a reason, but there's no point me whinging about it, if someone's shorter and stockier than me and therefore can lift more weight. No point me whinging about it and using that as an excuse. I just need to do my best. Yeah. So tip number 5: be a victor, not a victim. And tip number 6 is to tell others. Tell others what you're actually going to do. But tell the right people. And what I mean by the right people is, if you get those people that are going to say things like, if you're going to run a marathon, you're going to tell people one of two things are going to happen. There's going to be people that are really interested, want to really encourage you and support you and, see how you're going. And then there's going to be the people that will kind of be negative about it. And they might not be like overtly negative. You might kind of have those like backhanded compliments. Um, like quite often when you say to people you're running, they'll say, "Oh, running's bad for your knees" or something like that. Those kind of that they kind of mask it in concern, but they're really just being negative. Um, one you hear quite often in runners circles is, if you're running a marathon, someone says, "Oh, someone had a heart attack when you're running a marathon." Um, and obviously, people had heart attacks while running marathons, but I guarantee a lot more people that don't run marathons have heart attacks. So, but people kind of like focus on that negative thing to throw back at you, and kind of like try to disguise it as concern, but it's really negativity. And then you get that openly negative people that'll say, "No, what are you doing that for? That's pretty stupid." Um, so yeah, definitely when you are telling people, make sure you're telling the right people. Don't don't tell your naysays, the negative people. You don't want to get their negative feedback. Tell the right people. I'm going to use the bagpipe analogy again. Quite often when I tell people I play bagpipes, they'll say something like, I like bagpipes when they're played well. Well, with any musical instrument, you're going to play bad before you play well. So no one can magically play well right from the start. So I've heard that one quite a lot. Then you get people making, the same old jokes about strangling cats and things like that. So yeah. Um, kind of try to steer away from telling those kinds of people, and tell the people that are going to be like very supportive, and you don't want the people that are going to blow smoke up your ass, and the sunshine people that are always going to be, oh, that's so lovely, and you kind of know it's fake positivity. You want people that are genuinely, realistically positive. So the ones that are actually going to ask you about how you're going with it, they're going to check in on you, they're going to hold you accountable. So yeah, definitely tell people, but make sure they are the right people to tell. And number seven, my seventh and final tip to make it happen is to keep going. Now that's another obvious one. Once again, like the first one, obvious, you need to start. Number seven, obvious, you need to keep going. There will be setbacks. There's going to be things that are going to, stop you doing something for one afternoon, or there'll be a time you're not able to get to the gym, or there'll be a time where you can't go out for that run. There'll be the time when you get that big bill and your savings plan for that week will go out the window. There will be setbacks, but you need to keep going. That's where you need to have your backup plan. You just need to have that resilience to keep going. When things go wrong, just regroup, keep going. It actually reminds me of a bit of a story. It's a bit funny now, but at the time it wasn't quite so funny. And I promise you this is the last bagpipe story I'm going to say in this episode. But I was playing bagpipes. It was either Anzac Day or Remembrance Day, or one of those like solemn ceremonies, and I was playing the lament as people coming up and laying flowers at the cenotaph, and I swallowed a fly while I was playing. And if you swallow a fly when you're playing bagpipes, it is not pleasant at all. And I'm thinking, I can't stop. I need to keep going. This is like a very solemn thing. People are coming and laying flowers, they're laying wreaths, and they're relying on me to keep playing. So I'm not sure how I did it, but um, I was choking on this fly, but still somehow managed to continue playing until the final wreath was laid. So I guess that's my story about keeping going. I did have a bit of a setback there. Had a fly go straight into my mouth, into my throat while I'm trying to play bagpipes, but I somehow kept going. But yeah, look, there will be setbacks. There will be things that go wrong. Things won't go exactly the way you planned it. Um, every plan is a good plan until the first punch is thrown. I think Mike Tyson might have said that. I've heard similar ones, military type ones where every plan is a good plan until the first shot's fired. So, have your plan, but things are going to go wrong. Expect things to go wrong and regroup and keep going. So there we are, my seven tips to make it happen. I'll just go through them once again. So tip number one is to start. Obviously, you're not going to get anywhere unless you actually start in the first place. Tip two, have a plan. Tip three, have a backup plan. Um, Tip four, preempt your excuses. We've all got excuses. Um, Anyone that says to you, I never have any excuses, um, they're full of it. So yeah, preempt your excuses. You know what your excuses are going to be. Preempt them and come up with a plan to knock your excuses on the head. Tip five, be a victor, not a victim. Tip six, tell good people. Tell good, positive people, what your plans are, what you're going to do. Um, and tip 7, keep going. Despite the setbacks, just keep going. So there you go, guys. That is my episode. It's a re-recording of my first episode, which I did a year ago today on the 23rd of February, um, 2025, called Make It Happen. So this is Make It Happen, um, version 2.0. All the tips are the same. I think I just did it hopefully with a bit more experience because I've had a whole year's experience recording podcasts, so hopefully I can do a bit better job of it now. So there we go. I do want to give a huge shout out to all the people that have listened to my podcast over the last 12 months. I really do appreciate you guys. It's pretty amazing. Like when you look at just how many podcasts are out there, and it's physically impossible to even listen to a small fraction of all those podcasts. We've only got so much time in the day. When I drive to work in the morning, it takes me half an hour. It takes me half an hour to drive home. So I've really only got like, an hour a day that I can be listening to podcasts. Um, so I do understand that, you kind of got to choose your podcasts well because there's a lot out there and very limited listening time. So I do appreciate all you guys for choosing to include my podcast amongst those podcasts that you listen to. So thanks again, guys. I'm going to wrap this up here. That was episode 52 of the Kilted Athlete Podcast. My name's Keith, the Kilt Man Robinson, and I will talk to you guys, well, actually, in a few days' time on Friday for episode 53 of the Kilted Athlete Podcast. Thanks, guys. Bye.